launching in consciousness. So good morning again, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about evolutionary awakening. Waking up as an evolutionary process. And the vision from the Global Heart Vision that we're affirming with this is we strive to assist individuals in their own evolutionary awakening process. That's what we're here for as an organization, is to assist all of us in our own evolutionary awakening and waking up more and more to the infinite nature of good that we're surrounded with and are part of. Does that sound like a good journey to be on? Yeah, me too. So the original talk was called Don't Do Anything Until I Get Back. I didn't care for that as a talk title, so I changed it. That's the home office version of it. But it comes from a great quote by Swami Vyanananda, who was here about a year ago, as many of you remember, who's both a wonderful comedian, cosmic comedian, and also a very wise soul. And he says, I believe we were created to evolve. Otherwise, Jesus would have said, now don't do a thing until I get back. Okay? So we're here to keep on going. We're here to keep on going. Ernest Holmes expresses that with the idea of, let us be open at the top. Here's all that I know. Take it and go further. Take it and go further. And I love that about this teaching, is it's always going further. It's kind of a Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond sort of teaching, sort of process. So evolution is the continual unfolding of the divine idea of itself. We teach that there is one mind, one consciousness, one life energy, and it is continually expanding what it is and how it expresses itself. Okay? And it begins with the life energy itself, just the energy of life itself. And then that one mind contemplates itself. It contemplates its own nature, and out of that contemplation brings forth its own nature into form, into being. See, the life energy has to have form to play with, right? Otherwise, it's just an idea. We've covered this before. Do you want the idea of chocolate or do you want the actual piece of chocolate? You guys know which one I vote for, right? Do you want the idea of love or do you want the experience of love? The actual tangible experience. And so this life energy is here to express itself in form. And it individuates as you and me. As you and me. Spirit brings life into being for its own enjoyment. For its own enjoyment. We are here to be both enjoyed as and to enjoy Spirit. That's the core of why we're here. That's the core of why we're here. Spirit is the divine artist. Troy tells us, Thomas Troy, who was a British judge who spent most of his life in India, studied Hinduism, and then came back to, when he retired back to England, encountered new thought and said, wow, this is exactly what I believe, and started doing writings and talks, lectures about that. And he says, Spirit is the divine artist creating its own expression. The infinite is an artist. And guess what? You and I are the art of that expression. If you want to see a work of art, look in the mirror. Look at the person next to you. You're a work of divine art. Isn't that cool? Yes. Unlike the human artist who creates something and then it's done, Spirit keeps continuously creating. With the exception of, I understand there's a few artists who will continue to dabble on their paintings even long after they're done. I heard the story one time of a famous artist who had sold a painting, years later saw the painting up in somebody's house or something like that, got his colors and his paintbrush and ran up and made a slight modification to the painting, okay? So, but really what that is a divine urge to continuously create. And we are part of that urge. So we're not done. We're not a piece of art that's hanging on a wall in some place. We are the creative process expressing and being as us. You're a work of art that's continuing to be created. And then guess what? You get to be the individuation of that idea, so we get to create our lives. We get to create works of art as artists ourselves, because we are the embodiment of the infinite artist. You want to be an artist? Yes. You are. All of us are. And our life is our canvas. Our life is our canvas. Spirit in its creation has evolved consciousness. The early parts of creation that we've noticed on this planet, we're not real conscious, right? Rocks and stuff. But it's evolved and evolved and evolved. And so we are, as far as we know, the high point of consciousness on this planet. Excepting if you're Douglas Adams and have written the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I think it's the mice who are the highest form of intelligence on the planet, and then the dolphins, and I think we're number 3. But anyways, as far as we can tell, we're the highest form of consciousness on this planet. And so we get to create using that one mind. And so the way that we create is just as Spirit creates. We contemplate. We contemplate, and what we contemplate shows up in form. Isn't that cool? What I contemplate shows up in form. So we get to ask the question then, what am I contemplating? What do I, not a passing whim, but what do I contemplate? What do I spend my energy and my time on? I have to catch myself frequently saying, is that really what I want to create more of? And the answer, when I'm asking that question, the answer is usually no. Okay? What am I contemplating? Am I contemplating existing conditions, or am I contemplating the divine nature of Spirit? Which one do I want to create? I know for me, I like to create the divine nature of Spirit in my life, recreate that nature more and more. So the one mind is always creating even more complex forms of itself. Ever more complex forms of itself. Scientists call this syntropy. Okay? It's the opposite of entropy. Entropy is the idea that things are winding down and collapsing into ever more simpler forms and decaying and finally coming to an end. Okay? And scientists tell us that in certain closed conditions, that actually does happen. But the overall is a syntropy, which is that it's expanding. The universe is expanding. I once heard the metaphor of, it's sort of like we are raisins in a loaf of raisin bread that is rising. And so not only is the bread itself expanding, but the raisins are going with it in that expansion. Okay? So the whole universe is expanding. And we're part of that expansion. We are conscious points of that expansion. Okay? And it's expanding, it's creating more and more complex forms of itself so it can have greater enjoyment and greater freedom. More ways to enjoy and express itself. That's what you and I are involved in. See, you and I as conscious human beings can enjoy and express the beauty of Spirit much more than, say, a tadpole or a frog, right? Okay? A frog can be in the beauty of nature and probably doesn't recognize, wow, look at how beautiful this is. It's just saying, where's the next fly? Okay? But we can step back. And while we're looking for our food, we can also step back and say, and look at the beauty of this place. We can get conscious. We can appreciate and enjoy it. It also has a greater capacity for the individual to contemplate Spirit to a higher degree. There are more people today who are contemplating the true nature of Spirit than ever before on this planet. Our awareness of this, the ability to even have this kind of a teaching and to have people show up in a building and have this happening all over the country and all over the world of new thought, whether it's religious science or unity or divine science, and even some of the Christian traditions that are moving more towards what we teach, the ability to have more people doing this. There are sports figures who are meditating, right? There are people who never, ever before in the history would do stuff like some of the spiritual practices we do, and yet it's become much more common in the last 50 years. We're watching an evolutionary awakening, and we're part of it. And what I like to say is we're on the cutting edge of it, or we can be if we choose to be. We're part of that process. The fact that you're here is part of that process. So our horizon lines, I like to talk about horizon lines. A horizon line is as far as you can see, even though there's more beyond that. Our horizon lines, our ability to see, our ability to contemplate Spirit, our ability to understand is expanding. Each of us individually and all of us collectively, it's expanding for how much good we can contemplate. Thomas Trord again tells us that eventually we reach the point where evolution proceeds through the exercise of conscious selection and initiative on the part of the individual. And what that means is we get to be consciously part of evolution. It's no longer being done to us. We're no longer just going along for the ride. We are part of the process of choosing where do we evolve to next. Where do we go next? Okay? There's a wonderful Jefferson, it was the very, very, very first Jefferson Starship album, and it says, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Where do we go from here? We get to choose. We get to choose. We are the second coming. We are the Buddha being incarnated. We, you and I, all of us together are that. We don't have to wait for somebody to come along and save us anymore. We are the evolution expanding, and we are playing consciously in that. That's who we are. That's how important each of you is, each of us is. Because we are doing that, and we are being that. So how does this evolution thing work? When I went to school, biology, evolutionary process, was the idea that evolution is a sort of slow, gradual increase in the species, right? So in the mid-'70s, a couple of scientists named Niles Eldridge and Stephen Jay Gould came along and said, no, that's not how it works at all. We've been studying the fossil evidence. That's not at all how it works. How it works is things stay the same for a long time, and all of a sudden, pop! They call it punctuated equilibrium. Okay? All of a sudden, boom, there's an evolutionary change happening right now. Very quickly. Think of the last 150 years and what has happened for us as a human race in the last 150 years. 200 years ago, if I wanted to get from here to San Francisco, I would have done it the same way that it had been done for hundreds of years before. I would have either walked, hopped on the back of an animal, had that animal tow cart maybe, or perhaps canoed down a river somewhere, right? Same as for hundreds of years before that it had been done. Today, if we want to get to San Francisco, it takes a little less time, traffic permitting. We can drive. We can fly. We can not even have to go to San Francisco because if we want to go there for a meeting, we can Skype into the meeting from our home. If we want to go shopping, we can shop at stores in San Francisco online. We don't even have to send our physical bodies there anymore, unless there's something specifically. Okay? Somebody's shipping wood out there, apparently. We are in a state of punctuated equilibrium. You and I are already in that state. If you think it feels like the world is moving faster than ever before, it is. It is. I can't remember if I talked about this in one of the previous Sundays, but I was having a conversation with a couple of people in their 20s up in Eugene, and they were talking about it's no longer generational change, it's half-generational change. By the time they're halfway through their generation, the next generation is coming up who knows more than they do already. Okay? I love the Khalil Gibran phrase of your children are not your children, they're the arrows from the bow. Our children are our thoughts. Our children are our thoughts. Our children are what is going out into the future, and it is being shot farther. And why? Because the bow, that's you and me, is more stable and is stronger. We can create this because we are building on a foundation that has already been created, and you and I are both part of the foundation that's been created and then part of the forward movement itself. We are both the bow and the arrow. Okay? And so we get to play in that, and we get to play in that consciously, if we're willing to go. Because here's the problem that also Trord brings up. Race thought is opposed to evolution. The general race thought is here to keep us stable, to keep things just the same as they are, the same as they have always been. Talking heads, right? Same as it ever was, same as it ever was, same as it ever was. Sorry, I'm having musical flashbacks this morning. Evolutionaries are revolutionaries. If you want to evolve, you're a revolutionary automatically. Evolutionaries are misfits. You ever feel like a misfit? Yeah? The fact that you're sitting in this kind of a church in a traditionally Christian community says that you're a misfit here in Reading. Yes? Yes. They don't fit into the current system. In what's noted is that when things evolve, that punctuated equilibrium doesn't happen to the entire species where it's occurring. It happens to some of the species. Some of the species pops up into something new, and the rest stays the same and heads along on whatever tangent they're going for, whatever line they're going for, which may be to stay the same or maybe to drop down into extinction, okay? Not everyone evolves. You've probably noticed that. And some are slower than others. We do in this teaching say that everyone's going to get there. Everyone's going to get there. But we're on that cutting edge. I used to work for Amazon.com. We called it early adopters. People who would buy a product as it was coming onto the market. Okay? We're the people who have signed up and said, yes, I'm willing to jump in. I'm willing to go here. I'm willing to go forward ahead of the curve. Chord says that race thought is opposed to the attempt of the individual to pass into a higher order of life. Okay? When we try to be something more, we get a little pushback, don't we? Who do you think you are? Don't get too big for your britches? All that sort of stuff? That's called resistance. Michael Beckwith puts it this way: the mind of mediocrity opposes the mind of excellence. Okay? The mind of mediocrity. It's far more comfortable and it's far easier to be mediocre. Have you noticed? Yes. Okay? We don't have to change. We don't have to work out too hard. We know how this is. It's going along. You ever watch somebody who's in the same relationship, an abusive relationship, and just stays in the abusive relationship? Why do they do that? Because I know how to work this relationship. Sure, far better is available, but I know how to do this. Okay? We know how to work our system. All of us do. We all do this, by the way. You know, Lou keeps reminding me every once in a while of the book that I introduced him to called Do You Quantum Think? We all think within a system of thought, and it's a comfortable system for us, and we don't know that we're sitting in a system of thought until we finally have an aha moment where we realize that, yeah, we're stuck in a system. When people first started talking about white privilege, it was something that many of us didn't even think of, that we were thinking in white privilege or male privilege or whatever privilege, okay? We didn't even know that we were until somebody finally said, wake up. You've never had the experience that this other group of people has had. Domestication of the species from Don Miguel Ruiz. We get domesticated, we get hypnotized, we get stuck in the patterns we're in, and we don't even know we're stuck until at some point in time somebody says or something points out to us, or we have an experience that says, wait, there is another way to do this. And we have an aha moment. What I want to say about the mind of mediocrity is that it occurs not only outside of us, it occurs within us. We all have the gravitational pull to stay in mediocrity, to stay the same. It's why I don't go to the gym. Okay? It's far more comfortable to sit home and have another pint of ice cream, thank you very much, while I'm watching TV, rather than going to the gym and actually getting my body back into excellent shape that it used to be. We all do this. We all participate in this. Nothing to be ashamed of. So as we look at the idea of creating a world that works for all, we meet resistance, right? Who do you think you are? How are you going to do that? My favorite one that I've encountered, oh, you're an old hippie. It's called derision, putting you down, you know. Okay? Now that's nice. Get real. Get your head out of the sand. Have you looked around? The world's worse than it ever was. Okay? And most of the people who are stuck there are stuck in looking at conditions as they are, circumstances as they are, and not recognizing that the circum, that around stance, that's which is standing around us, is there because, guess what? We created it. We thought it into being. And guess what? We can think something new into being. We have that ability, but we so often get hypnotized by the circumstances right here in front of us that we forget about the fact that we can change. And then we start dealing with the circumstance, and the circumstance starts dealing with us, and we get into this catch-22 position of never getting out of it, and we have to change. We have to come up to something new. We have to wake up. So evolution is always forward, Ernest Holmes tells us. That's what the Khalil Gibran reading. Evolution does not tarry. Okay? Life does not go backward nor tarries with yesterday. That's the nature of life. Okay? I'm sorry. Some of us would like to go back to simpler times, right? You've heard that idea. The good old days. I loved Carly Simon's song when she came out with it, the Anticipation song that finishes with, and these are the good old days. These right here, the ones we're living in today. 25 years from now, we'll be looked back at as the good old days. Okay? Are we willing to move forward? So this week, what I want to invite us to do collectively is to start to create as Spirit creates, to get aware of that process, and start first of all by contemplating the fullness of the divine. Spend time contemplating the infinite divine itself. The Taoists tell us that the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Beyond whatever idea you and I have about God, there's more. Am I willing to contemplate that fullness, that moreness, knowing that no matter how far out I go, how big I can contemplate it, it's still more. And it's good. And it's love. And it's life. That's what we're contemplating. And to understand that it creates by self-contemplation. It creates out of itself, out of its own consciousness. The second thing I'll invite us to do is to be willing to let the evolutionary process of Spirit express through us. And that is simply, I am willing, a statement of I am willing to allow God to use me, to allow God to move me, this infinite presence, this infinite love, this infinite life energy, to move me into my next greater yet to be. I am willing to be part of that flow. It may be uncomfortable sometimes. It may take me into places where I'm not sure I want to go. Can I share something, what you shared with me about what you're doing? So Michael is in the process of moving to Houston for at least a year because his kids and his grandkids are there. And his wife wanted to move there. And he said at one point in time he finally realized that the only obstacle in the way of all that happening was him. And it wasn't him, it was his resistance to the change. When we get through with resistance to change, when we finally say, you know what, it's time for me to just be where I'm feeling called and pushed to go. And yeah, I'd love to stay here, wherever here is. And we all have a here that we'd love to stay. But yes, I'm being called into something even more than that. And so be willing to have it be the place. To note the resistance. You know, I love, Joe Dispenza has the book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Okay? We're all where we are because we're all in the habit of being our current self. And we have to break that habit, and sometimes that's uncomfortable. In fact, I would probably say most of the time that's uncomfortable. To break the habit of being ourselves, to be something new. And so to just be willing to let the universe move through us. And we may desire the simpler time, but the truth is we moved out of that time because it didn't work as fully as it could. Whatever that simpler time was in our lives, we moved from it because it no longer worked. See, eventually we move into walking because crawling isn't the most efficient way to get around the planet, is it? Okay? And so we moved into walking and running and bicycling and driving a car and flying a plane and wherever else we want to go. We moved from the old times because the old times eventually were too cramped for us to work in. And finally, the third practice is to catch for yourself a greater vision of the world working. And a powerful question for that is, what wants to express through me and as me to create a world that works better than it does now? What wants to express through me? And then to contemplate that. You don't even have to figure out how to do it, okay? We're going to talk about that in the closing quote. We don't have to figure out the how-to. Just, am I willing to contemplate it, and am I willing to say yes to go there? So that's our practice this week, to contemplate the nature of the divine, to be willing to let that divine, that evolutionary process flow through me, and then to start to be specific, what is mine to do in this process? Are you willing to play with me with this week? Yeah. Cool. I think it'll be powerful for all of us individually and collectively to go there. I'm going to close then with Ernest Holmes. He says, within the idea which spirit drops into creative medium. And when he's talking spirit here, remember, you and I are individualizations of spirit. So this is us. Within the idea which spirit as us drops into the creative medium, that which out of which everything is created, is everything necessary to bring this idea into form. When we get the idea and drop it in, everything that's necessary to bring it into form is already present in it. We don't have to know how. We don't have to know all the details. Okay? Spirit never thinks of methods or processes, for that with which the Spirit involves itself must evolve. Since it's the nature of Spirit to evolve, anything that Spirit involves itself with must evolve. The contemplation of Spirit, the self-knowingness of God, produces involution, and evolution is the passing of thought into manifestation. The passing of our thought into manifestation. We don't have to figure out the how. We have to be willing to go where we're being called to go. I'm so glad that we're playing with this game together. Yes. Let's move into prayer. So I know that there is this infinite presence, this infinite life energy, this one, that is so good. It is the pure love, the pure wholeness, the pure beauty, the intelligence, the power of this world and of all of life everywhere. That presence is all that there is. And because it is, each of us is one of it. Each of us is an individualized point of consciousness on this planet of this divine nature. That is what you and I are. Artistic creations and then artistic expressions of the divine, able to be our own artists in life. That is who we are. And so I speak my word from this awareness that beginning this moment, we create artistically even more beautifully, more powerfully, more lovingly than we have ever created before in our own lives and in the collective life of this planet, of this world. We don't have to necessarily know the how. We will be shown the how as we are willing to go on the journey. When I first show up for a painting class, I don't know how to paint. I am guided into how to paint. I am just willing to learn. And so I know that each of us has said today, yes, I am willing to learn. Yes, I am willing to be a part of this evolutionary process consciously, in alignment with the highest and greatest good of Spirit. And so I'm grateful for our willingness. I'm grateful for the yes in our hearts. I'm grateful for the good that manifests through us, for the beautiful creations of art that we are and that we continue to create. I'm grateful for all this, and I'm grateful, so grateful for the Spirit that moves through all of it and all of us. And so in that sense of gratitude, I release this word into the creative medium, what we call the law, and allow it to manifest into form and expression through the way that it knows how to do best. It's already done. And together we affirm that by saying, and so it is. Thank you.